Hey folks, I'm here and I'm talking about Mars and Jupiter in Sagittarius that we have very closely connected right now. As I'm recording this on March 11th, we see Mars, Jupiter are very close, and Ketu is also there. Before I get going, I just want to say, if you like this, if you like my videos or you like this, you can like, subscribe, get notified of upcoming videos and whatnot. Again, I appreciate that people show up, but again, it's good to share, like, subscribe, ring the bell to get notified of upcoming videos like this, because I do them quite a lot to keep people updated on what's happening in the sky. And as you can see, we have a close Jupiter-Mars conjunction right now. Ketu is moving away from the conjunction, but Jupiter-Mars in the sky right now is pretty important. And I want to talk about what we experience with a Jupiter-Mars conjunction in Sagittarius. Now, again, one of the things to realize is that Sagittarius is the sign that's ruled by Jupiter. So when we have Jupiter-Mars in Sagittarius, there's already that prevailing quality of Sagittarius, which is fiery, inspirational, looking toward higher purpose, is already going to be really developed because Jupiter, the ruler, is there. So anytime the ruler is in the sign, in the same sign, it pulls together the indications of the sign. So we're not just being, sort of triggered and out of sorts with the with the nature of that energy. And so, because sometimes, the Sagittarius can get disturbed or distorted or whatnot. And in this case, because the ruler is there, the Sagittarius energy is very together. So there's already been a question, can you touch on the coronavirus? I just talked about it yesterday, so I'm not going to talk about it today. Go watch the video that I did yesterday or the day before or whatever. I talked about it. So this nature of having Mars and Jupiter in Sagittarius is really bringing a lot of this higher philosophy and wisdom and things that are inspiring us into the forefront. And, we often see them, at least in our shared collective, roles, in the form of things like politics and social justice, literally things like Justice Department, legal things. We see it reflected externally because, again, Sagittarius is about what we think is right, righteousness. And that comes from Jupiter. What are the philosophies that we are following at any given time? What are those philosophies and principles that are inspiring us? That's what Sagittarius is about. And so Jupiter there means, since the end of last year, since like November of last year, we've been re-evaluating and reassessing what's right, what's righteous, and seeing the truth behind all the stuff that had been going on when Jupiter was going through Scorpio. And, one of the things that I described immediately as Jupiter went into Sagittarius was we actually saw that the impeachment trial and all of that legal system kicking into place. We saw the legal system taking over, showing the truth, at least, of what had been going on. Again, regardless of what anybody thinks of the verdict. It's the legal system, and the Justice Department and all of that. Very Sagittarius energy. And we see how much that has continued, actually. There's been all kinds of different things with the courts, even like I live in the U.S., so I could see it in the U.S. courts, but even in other countries and their sense of, and their political interactions, even with each other. I'm also going to talk about wealth and money here in a minute, because that's also a big part of Jupiter. But there's been a focus on things like higher purpose and meaning, and we see it played out in things like legal systems, since the end of last year. Now, Mars entered Sagittarius a few weeks ago, about a month ago. Let's go back. Oops, put it here. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so even a month ago, February 12th, so Mars entered February 7th. And so since early February, Mars has been clicking through Sagittarius. And now we have it up here, like right around at this point. And so as Mars gets closer to Jupiter, we see this sense. And by the way, the whole time Mars has been going through Sagittarius, it really shows where we are aligned and ready to fight for our principles. Anytime Mars is in Sagittarius, it shows this fighting for our principles. That's Mars in Sagittarius. So our desire to fight for something and what we're willing to fight for moves into that area of righteousness, teachings, truth. And again, this shows a desire and a capacity to fight for what we think is right. And again, on a collective level, we see this, we see this play out in the things like, the legal system and even, our government and our sense of justice. And so on a more personal level, though, we see this, certainly plays out relative to what sense of justice and purpose are do you stand for in your life? Not just what do you think is right and what is righteous and what is worth fighting for, but then what are you doing about it? It's not just opinions and ideas, which Mars can get hung up in these ideas and these opinions kind of masquerading as actions. But they're not. Actions are actions. Like, are you doing it? Are you walking the talk? Are you doing the practice? Are you doing the thing? That's what Mars is about. And are you doing the things that connect you to the righteous course, your teachings, the things you preach? So it's really about walking the talk, and especially walking the talk of, spirituality or inspiration. Is it just something abstract that you philosophize about, or is it something that you do in your life? Now, particularly for spiritual practitioners, Mars is really like the yogi. Mars is like the one who does the yoga in many ways, because it's the one that gets up early from the bed and rather than sleeps longer and does that work and sacrifices what they know is right instead of what is going to be comfortable or make them, happy and comfortable in the moment. Mars is the one on the razor's edge of that decision. So it's very powerful to have Mars in Sagittarius for putting your practices or for putting your principles into practice. It's really Mars that does that. So you can really look and introspect and notice in your life how, especially in the last few weeks, since early February, how you've been either putting into practice things that you know are right, or how you're maybe not doing it and you're aware of it. You're aware that you need to walk the talk more, that you need to have more integrity around your actions, that you need to be more disciplined. Big Mars keyword. And right now there's a lot of potential for that discipline as Mars is joined Jupiter. Again, Jupiter is the power of our beliefs and our philosophies. The philosophies and the beliefs come from Jupiter. Jupiter is the one who is inspired by them and who aligns with those gurus and those teachers that inspire us. And then Mars takes those inspiration and puts them into practice. sort of like the general of the army. And of course, the army is a symbol of what makes us strong. And so that we can occupy more territory, conquer more territory, so that our soul expands beyond just where it is. And so this whole quality of Mars and Jupiter in Sagittarius for the last month or so has been very beneficial for those who are, practicing yoga or doing other things. There's been a great spike in discipline or a lack of it if you're not doing the practices. What can happen is if you're not actually doing practices, you might notice that your practice is to argue with everybody about what they're doing wrong. And this is often the choice of Mars. Instead of actually doing what we know is right, doing it, not talking about it, arguing about it, instead we tell everybody else what they're doing wrong based on, oh, I got it figured out. I know what's right. And you're not doing it. You're not doing it. You're not doing it. Everybody's wrong. I'm right. I know what's right. And it's what everybody else is doing is wrong. Except for those in my group, in my tribe, in my political party, my country. Except for those who agree with me, my religion. Those who don't agree with me, they're doing it wrong. Now, again, you might not be practicing any of it. You might not be introspecting. And again, one of the things that can happen with Sagittarius energy, particularly with Mars energy there, and also Jupiter, is we can be quite fanatical about our beliefs. Beliefs are Jupiter, they're Sagittarius, and Mars can be very fanatical about it. Again, instead of practicing it, we're just trying to prove we're right and sort of crusading, right and wrong, black and white, and ready to fight the battle externally against other people rather than our own self and our own ignorance and our own lack of discipline. So for a couple of weeks, these things have been up for us. Notice how much you're, again, walking the talk, putting things into practice that you believe, or are you just a preacher? And again, a fiery preacher who is probably also maybe being fueled by quite a bit of hypocrisy at this point. Because again, this is the other thing. Even just Jupiter and Sagittarius can make us, a big preacher if we're not putting things into practice. Again, Mars brings the power to put it into practice. But if we're not, then it shows the power of our hypocrisy. It shows how hypocritical we are, particularly as it relates to spiritual teachings or even anything we're really fired up about. Again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of, for example, the politics of the day, but it definitely could show our polarized political biases. Oh, the other side is just so terrible while we're doing the same thing. I will give a quick example, again, because right now we're having a big political discussion here in the US, and a big shift happened where it was between like Bernie Sanders and a group of other politicians. And now the race has become very black and white. It's become very polarized. This is very Mars. It's Biden or Sanders. And all the people that really wanted Sanders now, it doesn't look like it's going to happen for a lot of reasons, which I'm not going to get into. But now they're so fired up that the other side is so wrong. And you did this, and it's the establishment who did this, and la da da da. And again, so much blindness there can be a lot of blindness in the things we say about the others, about the other people. For example, wanting Elizabeth Warren to drop out to help Bernie. Well, now they want Bernie to drop out to help Biden, to help the Democrats. How much, again, when they asked Bernie to drop out in 2006 to help Hillary, it was like, why should Bernie drop out? Well, then they asked Warren to drop out to help Bernie. Well, why should Warren drop out? Why should any of them drop out? Again, not seeing the fanaticism in our opinions and our blind spots can really come out in times like this. This is why we're seeing, notice all the fanatical polarizing, particularly in certain kinds of dialogue, like, for example, things like the politics, for example. That's a big one that is pretty noticeable. where we see it because it's so obvious, right? And again, I'm not going to talk about the coronavirus and all that today. I talked about it yesterday, but we can also see, you know, the decisions that would have been made or could have been made, like, you know, again, perhaps a lack of discipline, a lack of implementation and putting into practice what we should be doing, and the delay in doing that here in the US for sure. Now, the other one is Ketu is here, and Mars passed over Ketu also a couple weeks ago. Exactly, it was like February 24th, 23rd, 24th. And again, so a couple weeks ago, and you know, this is when we started to see some of these themes that I'm mentioning now, particularly with like the election stuff and even with the coronavirus getting much more exacerbated, was when Mars went over Ketu, back when it was in Mula. And so again, Ketu also brings a kind of rigid fanaticism, a kind of rigidity, a kind of blindness. Ketu is literally blind. It's like blind spots where we don't see certain parts of ourselves, where we don't see those things that we don't see. And they hang out as like these polarized, again, like things I'm mentioning now, like these fanatical blind spots. And, you know, so there's a real potential for these kinds of things right now. Again, we could look externally, but I do these mainly for people's spiritual growth, spiritual development. It's not just about politics in the world. I use these as examples, but in your own life. For example, what are your beliefs? Really examine your beliefs now about, I'll say this about the virus. I'm not making predictions about it, but because it's in our world, what is it bringing out in you? What I've noticed is things like this, things that threaten us or potentially threaten us, which it happens quite a bit. We get these scares about viruses and whatnot every few years. Now, of course, this one has already taken on much more of a serious nature. But even before it did, everyone who I see who becomes paranoid and flips out every year about the latest thing got paranoid and flipped out about this thing. By the way, they got equally as paranoid and flipped out about Trump. They got equally paranoid and flipped out about Obama, about this, about that. They're just ready to get paranoid, flipped out, and triggered no matter what the situation is. Now, again, you can also say, there's a saying, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean it isn't true. That's also correct. We have reason to be paranoid at times, for sure. And I don't say paranoid as such a negative thing. It means we're always on the lookout for the worst thing possible. So those who are prone to that kind of conflation and paranoia about the worst possible scenario that could come up at any time, you're seeing them now going through the roof. Because frankly, finally, after all these false paranoia events, like all of the viruses from the past, or the thing of the past, or this thing that was going to get us, or this thing that was going to get us, we have something here that's now showing up as a global thing. Again, even though it's not killing mass amounts of people at this point or yet, it's going to be, you know, quite a difficult thing for sure. There's no question. We already know that. It's still, regardless of that point, again, maybe try to see beyond the righteous. Well, but they're right to do that. No, that's not the point. The point is they're still, we project our nature onto things. The thing itself is still just what it is. It's no worse than it is, and it's no better than it is. Some people tend to make it the rosy scenario. Oh, it's not going to be as bad. That's their nature. They bring it to everything. Some people, oh, it's 10 times worse than we could ever imagine. That's their nature. And some people are somewhere in the middle where they try to just approach it sensibly and see and not get too caught up in one story or another. But this is how we see these things in our life. This is how, you know, external circumstances are just a mirror to your nature. At this point, we can see with the coronavirus, it's like a mirror being held up to our beliefs. What do we already believe about the world? What do we already ready to fight for, fight against? Where are we already triggered and certain that we're right and paranoid maybe, or this or that? Think about it. And I think this Jupiter, Mars, and Sagittarius right now, again, because it's also about beliefs, it's about beliefs on many levels. Again, like I said, social, political, just worldview, whatever. The one thing that I'll say, you know, again, relative to the coronavirus, because that's a big thing in relation to these transits right now, is it's showing you this. It's showing you what you already believe, how you already respond to pressure, how you already are wired. Again, when pressure gets turned up, it exacerbates it. So it's not just a general thing, because you could just kind of go through your life and not have that part come out, but now all of a sudden, threat, this virus, that virus, H1N1, bird flu, Y2K, blah, blah, blah. Now, you know, that's your response to all of those things are pretty much the same every time. So notice that. Notice your reaction and how much you're taken out of your deeper self or brought more into it. Because for some of us, those things, the more crazy the world gets, the more internal we get. But it takes practice. And it doesn't mean that you're not engaged. It doesn't mean that you're disconnected. It doesn't mean that, well, you can't just meditate it all away. Again, people who don't meditate would say something like that. People who don't do practices would say something like that. Those who do practices regularly realize that's not what you're doing. You're just not getting caught up in the fact or the unreality that your whole life revolves around what's happening in the world. And when you're not getting caught up in the fact that your whole life doesn't revolve around what happens in the world, then when things happen in the world that are so screwed up or potentially paranoia, you know, inducing or triggering, you don't lose yourself to it. So that's the only reason that, you know, that's why I'm bringing it up in this context, because regardless of what winds up happening, and hopefully it's not bad, hopefully there's a containment. Again, people want to know what I think about that in general, like with the transits and upcoming. I did a video a couple days ago on financial collapse and coronavirus and where we're at right now. Watch the video. It was the last one that I did a couple days ago live. This one, I'm just talking about it in relation to our capacity to get triggered, our capacity to lose our beliefs, and our capacity to follow what we already believe. If we already believe that we're this person of the world and our whole life revolves around the world, and oh my God, what's going to happen? If that's already our belief and our habit and our pattern, things like this just exacerbate it. They don't create it. It wasn't created by coronavirus. Because again, every potential tragedy relative to how tragic it might be will react that way. So introspect about that. Notice that. That's your part in it. That's your part in it. That's why you're here. That's what karma is you incarnating here to see yourself interacting with the world, to see yourself engaged with other people, with the world, with your own mortality. That's why you're here. That's what this world is for. On a spiritual level, that's its purpose. There are other existences, other levels of existence where this world isn't here imposing this reality of time on you, like in the dream state and in other states where you're not confined and limited by this world. So what's going to happen going forward, of course, is Mars and Jupiter are going to get even closer. And, you know, what that means is that as Mars and Jupiter get closer, we have things get even more concentrated around this nature, where we get even perhaps more fired up and more excited. And again, you know, one of the things, because I know we're in the political season, but you know, we have a debate coming up. I think it's on. There's this debate here. This is a Sunday night debate with Sanders and Biden here. Again, Jupiter and Mars are coming closer and closer together, and not just the debate between those two, but the clash of the supporters in the aftermath of the debate, and then into next week with other big primaries that are happening in the political realm. I'm talking about this. You could see going into next week, again, around this time next week on the, well, this is March. So, you know, in 10 days from now, they're going to be almost exact here, 9-10 days, right? So again, you push us forward next week, and around the end of next week, we will have had a debate. We will have had a bunch more primary races, especially in the Democratic. Biden looks really good in these because he's winning now because the voters are speaking, and they're not wanting what Sanders is proposing one way or another. And again, what the supporters of Sanders are saying, oh, it's just the mainstream media conspiracy taking it away from him. Some of them are, most of them aren't, frankly, what I've seen, but it's still the same old kind of fury, right? And again, so I just point to this as a flashpoint that is coming in the next week or so. Notice it. And again, notice the blind spots in the holes in the arguments, the blind spots. And again, there's on the other side too, where the establishment, you know, not acknowledging and recognizing the enthusiasm on the other side that Biden is this kind of warmed over establishment figure that's just sort of Republican light, and the fury against that, you know, all of the sides are legitimate. You know, it's not as if the arguments in and of themselves are counterfactual or are wrong. The problem is we get factionalized and we get extreme, and it's I'm 100% right, you're 100% wrong on both ends. And then nobody talks to each other. There's no middle ground. It's saint or the spawn of hell, right? Like, this is the only way we could win, and we could never win that way. Again, just the prevailing ridiculous polarization and extremes now. Again, and even pointing it out frustrates people. Like even pointing out that, you know, to all the Biden people, all of them think Bernie could never win. To all the Bernie people, all of them think Biden could never win. Okay, like there's no gray area, I guess, right? So again, when you get polarized around these things, and it looks something like this: Jupiter, Mars, Ketu, Sagittarius. I'm 100% convinced that I'm 100% right, and all the blind spots that hang out in the, you know, in between. This, so this is, you know, I just put a link there. If people did want to also get a the forecast for 2020, that where I'm talking about these things, especially these the nature of the upcoming transit, because what's going to be happening here real soon, as you see, we're now March 22nd, or March 22nd through May 4th. Mars is going to go into Capricorn, and then March 29th through June 29th, Jupiter's in Capricorn. All these planets are now going to go through Capricorn. And I talked about this at great length in my 2020 forecast. Again, it's free. You don't have to pay anything. You just go there. That 2020vedicastrology.com, and it forwards you to this page, and you just reserve my seat now. You can watch it right now. You can watch instant replay, or you can select a time to sit down and watch and learn also about Saturn's important shift. Saturn went into Capricorn early January. You see the first part of it was January 24th. Saturn enters Capricorn. So you need to really understand the sign of Capricorn. For the next 2 to 3 years, Saturn in Capricorn is determining your life. In many ways, it's determining these long-term commitments that you're really focused on now, or that you should be focused on, wherever Capricorn falls. is extremely important. And as I said, it's not only extremely important in general, but this year especially, it's really important because not just is Saturn there, but all these planets are about to go into Capricorn. Like I said, we can see here that even by next week into, this says March 19th, Mars is right on the cusp of Capricorn, so is Jupiter. But you can see, even on the thing I just talked about, by the end of March, by March 22nd, Mars is in Capricorn. And then a week later, Jupiter is in Capricorn for 3 months. So this whole sign of Capricorn this year is really just exacerbated. It's so important and prominent. And on that 2020 forecast, I talk about this transit of Saturn through Capricorn, which again, that's going to be determining the nature of your focus and your commitment and your deeper, need to concentrate your energy on something for the next couple years. But in light of that cycle, not only is it that, but in the next month, in the next few weeks, we're going to have all these planets going through Capricorn. So it's going to really concentrate that life lesson. This is really kind of the initiation of that big life lesson for the last couple years, or for the next couple years. Now, we've been feeling it because Saturn went into Capricorn at the end of January. But with this that's coming up, you're going to really feel it. It might have been something where you kind of feel it, but maybe you don't have any planets there, or it hasn't been that prominent in your life so much. It probably has a little bit, but maybe you don't notice it. Now you're going to notice it. Mars is going to be there too, Saturn and Mars, until May 4th, and then Jupiter there from March 29th until June 29th. So this is a major shift, a major transit. And again, this forecast here, it's free. Go sign up for it. Again, I do this stuff as a public service so that people understand, and also so that people will learn how it works. Because I want people to understand astrology, not just listen to me tell them everything, but to actually learn it and study it. You're supposed to know this. This is the body of knowledge that you're supposed to know. You're supposed to know and understand it. And seeing that and being exposed to it in that very deep and profound way can definitely, it really shifts our consciousness. And I want to do my best to make that happen if it's at all possible. So again, talking about this here and where we're at, this Mars, Jupiter, and Ketu also in Sagittarius right now is really bringing a lot of intensity around this, around our beliefs. And we need to really work hard to stay inspired for the common good. What's the highest good? Again, what's the highest good, even like with politics or this or that? What's the highest good? Only you can answer it for yourself. But in answering it, are you just furious because everybody's not listening to you and how you're convinced you're absolutely right about everything? And it's not even possible that this other thing could happen or that you could possibly be wrong. This kind of fury, this kind of blind belief in what we already believe, what our opinions are. And many of them are just driven by our kind of desire to want to deify or, confer like saintly status on someone or some figure. Again, this is the lower quality of Sagittarius. And it doesn't have to be lower qualities of gurus or of God. It can be of political figures. And again, we see so much of this now in the world. By the way, like I said, to me, this is the biggest problem with the politics these days. Nobody is really just rational or sensible. It's all savior. Again, Trump the savior, Bernie the savior, this one the savior. We're looking for saviors in politicians instead of learning the truth of who we are, the true nature of our spirit. And these politicians are people hired to do a job. Instead, it's like, he'll save me. And of course, they exploit that. They exploit it. I alone can fix it. This is Trump's savior proposition. Like, for example, Bernie Sanders has another one. Biden has another one. They all have a slogan to get us to believe that they're the savior. And again, instead of being practical and sensible about this stuff and using our brain to look and figure it out and keep in mind what's happening, we get into this kind of savior devil polarizing, which neither is true. And so, again, this is a problem to me. The biggest problem in the world, one of the biggest ones, is this kind of lack of discrimination in so many ways. So again, when we get these kinds of placements, it really converges. So this is why when you hear me talk about Jupiter and Sagittarius sometimes, and it's like, oh, it's good, it's guru, it's teacher, it's belief, it's religion. I also say every time, it's also blind faith, fanaticism, not seeing, not being willing to adjust. It's also all of that. And we're seeing it now. And by the way, I'll just say this because I've had people give me a really hard time about saying that before. People, again, because a lot of people learn astrology and they learn it from teachers that don't teach it like that. They don't teach it like it's a whole kind of range of possibility. They're like, oh, Jupiter, it's not right to say Jupiter and Sagittarius is like that. That's good. It's our, our beliefs are always good. It's always good. It's like, no. And people don't like when I say that. It's also things like, I'll use examples of things like terrorist or fanaticism is also very much that energy gone too far. Again, that's why we have to check our beliefs, especially our beliefs in people and in figures and in religion, or turning people into religious figures. We always need to check that against Mercury, which is healthy intelligence, questioning, more humor, more, again, like if we have no sense of humor, no tolerance about any of it, we're gone too far. And many people wouldn't think that they've turned, for example, like political figures into religious icons. But what else is a religion? But the thing you think is going to save you from something. Again, most people aren't that religious, frankly, or they don't really believe in that, or, and the thing that they're attached to is the world. And again, this is why I talk about things like politics and social causes, because that's where most of us are living. At least that's our collective identity. But even, we're all living in this world and looking and wanting to save the world, wanting it to be saved for us and wanting to do our part. So I'm not trying to criticize people, just trying to point out that we can see this kind of polarizing right now. The benefit is we're ready to fight for what we believe in. But again, it can be really polarized right now, and we can lose the higher purpose in the fight. Particularly when everything revolves around the world, and we lose the inner world, we lose the essence of who we are. We lose the essence of our true nature as a being of spirit, not a being of form. And that this world is literally Maya. It's a mirror being held up to our level of consciousness. And we have a collective Maya, a collective illusion, and a personal relationship with it and with each other. And so if people want to ask questions, you could ask a few questions if you want. I'm going to take a little drink here, but seeing some people here that showed up. And so if people have a question, you can ask. I'm going to take a drink for my big mug. It's my big mug, see? See, this is what I do. I just get big mugs. Look, it's as big, almost as big as my head. Is that crazy or what? So, a couple statements. Thanks again for valuable info. You're certainly welcome. I'll put this here again. I'll just put this link again for the class because, again, I really hope that if people haven't gotten it before, that they will check out this web class because it can really help you if you haven't yet. And it'll also show you how astrology works because you'll see me analyze all the different houses, all the different transits. So it's really good for astrology students as well. It's very easy, just 2020 vedicastrology.com and check it out. And, you know, hopefully that will, you know, benefit you as well. Let's see, do we have any questions? I love it. What's your take when Mars moves into Capricorn end of March and gets close to Saturn? Were you listening? I'm going to tell you again. I'm going to give you a great opportunity to actually learn. Guess what? On this web class, you will learn. One of the things you will learn is Mars exalted in Capricorn. This is what I'm doing on the web class. So my take is, if you want to know my take, get a free hour-and-a-half class on 2020. By the way, it's all the big transits this year. So again, that's what I'm saying. And I don't feel like explaining it again. It's a lot to explain. But first of all, my take is that Saturn and Mars are there in Capricorn. So I explain that in great detail on that web class. And again, it's a great question. We all should know it. So it did, like, wow, it makes all perfect sense now. Good. I was born January 91. I was born when Saturn and Capricorn. How would this affect energy in my first house? So I'm not just trying to, first of all, I'm not selling anything on the web class. The web class is free. I talk about what Saturn means for all 12 signs, including yours. If you want to know, go get the web class. I'm going to say it because, you know, Capricorn, stellium in your first house, was born with Saturn and Capricorn. How will this energy affect my first house? Why don't you go learn? I talk about how it affects Capricorn, having Saturn in your first house for the next 3 years. That's a big part of what the web class is. I'm just going to keep it up because I think probably this is what people are asking. Again, on the web class, you learn Saturn in Capricorn for your sign and what to commit to for the next 2 years. So I literally, that's the focal point of that. I did click on the link, but didn't action yet. Didn't want to miss out on the live session. Okay, that's fine. So I'm glad you asked, man. So it says, yes, teach a man to fish. Exactly. One of the reasons why I do things like this is because I actually want people to learn, right? And particularly in this environment, I'm glad to do these things so people can see it. But again, I can only do so much, and especially individual charts. That's why I put together these things so people can see how it works. And by the way, if you apply those principles, you can learn how to do it, actually. So at some point, maybe astrology will become something that you actually want to study, because that's the best thing. Sharita said, I'll definitely check it out. Thanks. You're certainly right. You're certainly welcome, Sharita. Does Mars going over Jupiter make us take action on our belief systems? Yes, that's what it's doing. That's definitely what it's doing. It's bringing action on your belief systems. And that's a good question, because this is exactly what I'm talking about now. So use this as an example. Right now we have this thing, we have the coronavirus, we have other things. You have other things in your life. I'm mentioning this because I know this is something we're all sharing. And based on your belief about the world and how you basically see the world, you're acting on that. Maybe you haven't taken a lot of actions, but internal, like you're acting, you're buying food, or you're feeling it'll all work out, or you're acting based on your beliefs right now. This Mars Jupiter is really bringing a lot of us into the sphere of action based on what we believe. What I talked about at the beginning of this web class was that, more than anything, was that right now, the biggest thing that all of this external stuff is showing us, it's revealing our beliefs about the world. I'll say this last thing, because I feel like probably some of the questions are now people that came late or whatever. But one of the things I said was, notice how everybody is reacting to this the way they always react to things. Notice the people in your life that you've known for a long time. The last time there was a potential panic, and the time before that, and the time before that, they react to all of them the same way. Now, again, this one, maybe we're a little more justified now because it's obviously revealing that it is a lot more potentially dangerous than the other ones. I'm still saying potential because I haven't lost my mind yet. It's still not this mass death. It's still not tens of thousands or millions. It's maybe getting close to 10,000, but it's not the millions of people that are dying. Again, we have flus and we have other things all the time. This could definitely get way out of hand, but I don't overstate it because this is my nature. You see how I deal with it. That's how I deal with it. But you see, everybody deals with it the way they deal with all of these things. They're not different. They dealt with the last one this way. I know I see with my Facebook friends, the same ones who are convinced that every potential pandemic is the death of us all, and they're going to lock us all up in FEMA camps and microchip us, and it's just them doing it. It was cooked up in a lab to kill us all. They say this every time. The same stuff. The same people say the same thing every time. I respond the same way. You respond the same way. But right now, again, with the Mars-Jupiter, we're being challenged to really look at your response. Look at your reaction to it. Notice that's you. That's your nature based on your beliefs and how much belief and really what your beliefs are even about the world and the universe. It's really showing that. What do you actually believe in a higher sense? Do you really believe that your whole life revolves around what happens on the earth? Again, I'm not minimizing people dying or whatever, but do you think, or does your life revolve around teachings that are beyond? Do you not just believe those things, but do you practice them? What are your practices like in reference to your beliefs? Again, these are your questions, and you'll see that the people react based on those questions and those answers. Again, those people who say, "Well, it's just the government cooking it up in a laboratory," they believe that no matter what happens. That's their beliefs. This is just an excuse to then say, "See." The way we react, I also talked about the political stuff. Our reactions to all of that is often how we react to anything where it feels like maybe I could do this thing to like, this is right, this is righteous. And we get that way in all situations like that. This just happens to be showing us this now. So that's really the thing to take away from it. So there's a few questions about literal things with the coronavirus. I'm not going to get into specific predictions. Someone asked about if it's going to resurface again around October. Again, I'm not doing that right now. Those things it's not just a game. You got to draw up charts and do research. Okay, that's what you need to do. So I appreciate the question. It's a good question. Maybe I'll research it and look into it. I usually don't, frankly, just because I'm not that interested in it, to be completely frank. And so we'll say that. So Joshua said, would you say the current stuff in the world is a reflection of collective consciousness that is manifesting in some way? Of course. Everything is, my friend. What else is? Of course. But again, here's the thing. Don't look at it like it's somehow some collective consciousness manifesting in some way. Collective consciousness doesn't manifest in some way. It manifests through karma, which means the actions that the collective consciousness takes. So what is the collective consciousness? What kind of actions has the collective consciousness taken that could have possibly produced all of these coronaviruses? Well, I have an answer for you, and I talked about it before. It's the mass torture of animals, eating animals, killing animals, treating animals like they're our property, mostly without consequence. This started, like many of these viruses, especially the coronaviruses, jumping from animals to people in these open-air markets where they're selling all these animals for us to eat, treating animals like our property, taking the contagions out of their body and interacting with them so they mutate and then jump into ours. And then before you know it, So collective consciousness manifesting is very abstract. It's not abstract. It's very literal. Collective consciousness manifesting is in these kinds of actions. Look at the actions. Look at what made it happen. It didn't just happen somehow. It didn't happen somehow. It happened specifically. Literally, we can see what did it. Unless you believe it was cooked up in a laboratory to kill us all. Again, these are other theories. I just don't engage in those things. I don't think that's correct, and I'm not going to get into that, but there are people who, you know, rip into me because I actually, oh, you believe it was that? It was the Chinese that have been trying to kill half their population. Okay. I don't want to get into all that. I don't think that's what it is. So, yes, this is what collective consciousness looks like, though, just to be literal. It doesn't show up in some kind of abstract way. It's shown in the actions, just like everything else. It's the actions. They show you how the collective consciousness is being revealed. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Other people have it's great to have the conversation. I hope this was helpful, and people have I hope this was beneficial and helpful to people. Last thing, Joshua, yes, what you said is right here. Karma is the link. Look, karma is our actions. It's simple. I'll make it simple. There's nothing abstract about it. Stop trying to make it abstract. I don't like to say stop, but think of it in this way. It's not that complicated. Karma is the actions. You have individual actions that you take. We have collective actions that we take. We are doing these actions. It's not abstract. What are the actions that we are doing that created this thing? I've said this so many times before. I'll say it again. The worst thing human beings have ever done is the way we systematically imprison and torture and treat animals like our property. And we do it collectively without any guilt, consequence, remorse. Billions and billions and trillions of animals annually treated like property without, most people don't even give it a second thought. These viruses, this is literally where it comes from. We know where the virus came from. It came from open air markets. This one in Wuhan province jumps from bats to another host and then into a person, and then they mutate. They're not even that harmful in the bat, but they come into us and mutate in our physiology. All of those viruses, coronaviruses, come from us interacting with animals in this way, treating them like they're our property. And the mutations happen usually in these environments where you have this animal, that animal, blood, internal thing everywhere, people buying this stuff, exchanging all these fluids where all these animals are being slaughtered. We know where they come from. It's not abstract. And to say that that's not the source, it is the source. And karma is not abstract. It's the actions you take as an individual and we take collectively. Look at the collective hypnosis around how valid and legitimate it is to treat animals this way. Have you heard one person on the news yet? One person on the news yet say, maybe the problem is we shouldn't be slaughtering animals like this. Remarkable, isn't it? Just remarkable. I'd crap my pants on the spot if one of these announcers ever said, maybe this coronavirus is an opportunity for us to stop destroying the planet, treating animals like they're our property, and actually start to transition into a more holistic vegan lifestyle, vegetarian lifestyle, because it also doesn't destroy the land, it doesn't destroy the environment, it doesn't bring endless torture on innocent beings. Maybe one day that might be said by an expert somewhere. God knows. I'd blow my brains out if I ever heard it, probably. I'd be so happy. We don't even think about it. We don't even think about it. Who thought of that? Right? So, yeah, this is collective karma. So, this is what I think anyway. Maybe I'm wrong. Or maybe it's cooked up in a laboratory to kill us all by the Chinese. Yeah, there's that too. You know, a biological agent to reduce population or something. I think it's the former. I believe it is what we said it is, and it's very clear. Again, this is human beings playing God. We're not God. God is God. God has put the animals here. The animals are fine until human beings come in and possess them and torture them and eat them and kill them and use them as a commodity to make money off of. You know, that host animal, I forgot what it was called, the one that looks like an armadillo. I forgot what it's called. Somebody put it in there because it's the animal that they think was the host animal between the bat and then this other animal. You know, that's the most hunted animal or the most abused because of the scales, because they think that the scales has some superpower. Or tigers. You know why tigers disappear? Because of penises, tiger penises, rhino horns, elephant tusks. Human beings are rapacious virus. We're the virus on the earth. Frankly, I'm sorry to sound so misanthropic at this point, but if you really want to know how I feel about this part of humanity, that's what it is. We can't leave anything alone because of money and commerce. And this is the biggest problem that humanity faces. And yes, this is a part of it. By the way, it also has to do with global warming and how these viruses and these contagions now live longer because winter isn't as long. Again, this has to do with things like ticks and stuff, other pests that have been on the rise in the last few decades because the winters are shorter and they're not as cold, so they don't destroy all the contagions and pathogens. Anyway, we could go off about this, but don't think for 1 minute that somehow our collective karma isn't behind everything. It's not an abstraction. It's not somehow energetically. It's no, it's in the actions we do. This is why karma is action. The actions we take and the results that come from those actions. It's a direct correlation. There's not even an inch of wavering. Whatever actions you take, you get exactly that result. Collectively, it's the same way. So I'm glad it was. No, I'm actually glad it was brought up here, and this is a good thing to bring up. And again, it's definitely these are the things that we need to look at, you know, and you know, as you can see, this is my Mars, Jupiter, and Sagittarius, right? This is me like totally convinced I'm right. You know, maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? So I'll look at myself too, but you know, I do think I'm right. Sorry. Like Amy says, go vegan, ahimsa. Yes, it's the first tenet of yoga. And I was not so, you know, I mean, I've always been pretty much, you know, vegetarian and vegan. And so I've always had a natural instinct that that wasn't right. Again, not just for the humanitarian part, but even for the dietary part. And, but you know, this is the yogi way. This is the yogic life. And people will say, well, back in India, they ate meat and stuff. Well, back then, you know, there's a lot of things around all of that. They were trying to survive. And if we had to survive, it's okay to take the life of an animal if it's going to be you or the animal. But that's not what we're doing now. It's not for that reason. It's not even for health reasons, because it's certainly not the healthiest thing to be eating or to be doing. And we already know this. We're not in the dark ages anymore. So anyway, I will leave it at that. I'm happy that people have showed up, and you have a good one. Everyone take care.